Yeah, it
It's
was just,
so
yeah, it was
weird.
like the week before, I was like, oh gosh, I'm 50. And then I was like, what happened to the 40s? And then my friends were like, let's have a party, let's do something.
Keanu Reeves is the legend of legends, Hollywood's valuable gem, and a rare talent that the world may never see again. He is not merely Neo, the one who altered reality in The Matrix, or John Wick, the Avenger who carved revenge into mythology. He is the live heartbeat of cinema, the silent storm that has given his body, soul, and generosity to generations of viewers. In an entertainment industry rife with illusions and ego, Keanu stands out as the kindest, most genuine man in Hollywood, the most humble soul among the stars, a human treasure whose generosity has touched strangers and whose dignity has silenced critics, an angel walking among us, kind, compassionate, humble, strikingly handsome, and much more. He is living proof that there may be one man who is liked by everyone. He is the reason we believe in goodness and want everyone could be more like him. But behind that eternal glory, behind the smile that has comforted millions of hearts, there are wounds that will never heal, cold, stifling nights, and darkness that cling to his soul as if to pull it apart piece by piece. Now, at 61, the guy who once appeared impenetrable is still fighting through the worst chapters of his life, where grief refuses to let go and haunting memories surround him as painful health issues get more severe. Do not turn away, for what he is going through right now could be the most difficult chapter of his life. If you believe Keanu Reeves is more than just an actor, but a legend of compassion, show your support by leaving a heart in the comments as an eternal homage to Hollywood's rarest gem. Keanu Reeves's earliest wounds were not caused by fame, but by childhood itself. A father who has vanished, a mother seeking security through broken marriages, siblings scattered over various branches of a fragmented family tree, and a youngster who learns much too early that love may vanish in a single breath. Keanu Charles Reeves was born on September 2, 1964 in Beirut, Lebanon. Even his name, Keanu in Hawaiian, means cool breeze over the mountains, yet the poetry of his early life was quickly drowned out by chaos. When he was born, his father, Samuel Nolan Reeves Jr., a Hawaiian geologist with Chinese, Portuguese, and English ancestry, and his mother, Patricia Taylor, an English costume designer, were already drifting apart. Within 2 years, their marriage fell apart, and his first memories were imprinted not in comfort but in absence. His father's shadow became greater as it disappeared. He left it too. At 13, Keanu saw him for the last time on Hawaiian soil, a silent farewell that would never be broken. Reeves subsequently claimed that he seemed to have gone into quiet. Decades later, he admitted to Penthouse that we thought our lives would be better if we had our father with us. However, no return was ever received. Patricia carried the heavy weight of survival, with her profession taking the family from Beirut to Sydney, then New York, and finally, Toronto. At each destination, she sought security in new marriages, but each fell apart, leaving behind a carousel of stepfathers who never stayed long enough to be recognized as family. This instability produced half-sisters and step-siblings. Karina Miller was born from a single marriage, Emma Reeves from his father's later years, but only Kim, his younger sister, shared both parents and the storms of childhood. To Keanu, Kim was more than just a sibling. She was the only indication that family might be more than just a word in transit. Childhood for the Reeves children was half-packed bags, unfamiliar walls, and birthdays celebrated in cities that blended together. Home was never a haven, merely a respite before the next turmoil. The school provided no shelter. Keanu spent 5 years cycling around 4 high schools, attempting to adapt. Dyslexia hindered his reading, turning every classroom into a battlefield. Letters refused to stay on the page, while classmates rushed ahead. Teachers misunderstood his agitated behavior for defiance. One principal simply ejected him for asking too many questions. "I questioned everything too much," Reeves later said. "I couldn't help it, even if it got me in trouble." Labeled a tough student, he was really just a youngster trying to grasp a world that was constantly shifting beneath his feet. Amidst the pandemonium, one haven emerged: the ice rink. Keanu earned the nickname The Wall as a custodian due to his quick reactions and resilience. Show him some respect. Behind the mask, he discovered belonging, a unique identity that he could claim. He fantasized about playing in the Ontario Hockey League and representing Canada in the Olympics. For a boy without a permanent home, hockey was more than just a sport. It gave him purpose, joy, and demonstrated his ability to be indestructible. Then came the awful twist. At 15 years old, when most youngsters were still dreaming freely about the future, a terrible injury ripped his hockey dream away in an instant, leaving him sidelined while others pursued the future he had anticipated. What had previously been his only steady anchor in life was wrenched away, reminding him of how ruthlessly brittle stability could be. By the end of his adolescence, Keanu had experienced what would shatter many adults: the silence of an absent father, the instability of a mother's broken marriages, the sting of being left behind in class, the ache of fractured sibling bonds, and the heartbreak of seeing his greatest dream vanish on the ice. It was a harsh lesson in loss, teaching him that joy is fleeting and belonging is always uncertain. However, these traumas did not harden him into bitterness. They forged him. An absent father helped him empathize with the abandoned. A carousel of stepfathers taught him that trust has to be earned. Dyslexia taught him to be patient with imperfections. And the injury that ruined his hockey career pushed him towards the stage and film, paving the way for the fate that would one day make him a legend. Looking back decades later, Reeves realized that sadness takes on different forms but never goes away. That truth contains the echoes of a youngster who first experienced grief long before Hollywood's spotlight reached him. His childhood was more than just a preparation for greatness. It was the furnace where grief and perseverance met, resulting in the quiet power, humility, and resilience that would one day make the world fall in love with Keanu Reeves. When the roar of the hockey arena was taken away from him at 15, Keanu refused to accept silence. Instead, the stage began to murmur, and a youngster who had lost so much found solace in stories. What he didn't realize was that this new desire would necessitate not only talent, but also the same hunger and tenacity that had previously defined his young existence. By the time he walked out of school, labeled a misfit, he'd determined that performance would be his salvation. Dyslexia transformed every script into a battleground, but the camera never required speed. It required honesty. He worked odd gigs on minor Canadian TV shows, sipped soda in a Coca-Cola commercial with the desperation of an underdog trying to prove his worth, and even hosted a children's show where his clumsy charm won over young fans. These weren't glamorous beginnings. They were survival pay for a boy who had already adopted survival as a second skin. Keanu drove into Los Angeles, armed with only a decrepit Volvo, a suitcase, and a name that most people couldn't pronounce. He rented out sparse apartments, stretched every dollar until the cabinets were empty, and knocked on doors that rarely opened. Casting agents looked at him with perplexed eyes. Was he a leading man or simply a drifter? In a city that devoured dreamers by the thousands, Hollywood's gates were hefty, and Keanu had only his bare hands. Then, a flash of recognition. River's Edge, a gloomy indie film, portrayed a soul grappling with shadows that went far deeper than the industry anticipated. Soon after, Permanent Record portrayed him as a young guy mourning the death of a friend, and critics began to complain that his performances were far too raw to be staged. They were correct. The anguish on television mirrored the losses he had been carrying all along. In this fragile window, he also met River Phoenix, a kindred soul who shared his desire for truth in art. Their friendship offered Keanu a sense of belonging in an industry that had previously treated him with suspicion. But fate, as cruel as ever, was already waiting for them both. Destiny pulled another cruel joke on him just when he was reaching for deeper roles. Bill and Ted's fantastic trip elevated him to the status of cultural phenomenon, with millions of people loving him as the silly time-traveling Ted. But what seemed like a welcome respite rapidly turned into a cage. The airhead name stuck to him, as if Hollywood had deemed him too light for darkness and too simple for sorrow. Years later, he said, "I wanted something lighthearted, but that label stuck with me for years." Even triumph had teeth. and every cheer cast a shadow. These beginnings were never free of cost. Each triumph echoed the ghosts of his past. The youngster who had been expelled for asking too many questions was now discarded for desiring too much depth. The adolescent whose ambition on the ice was shattered is now pursuing another dream under merciless lights. Fame was on the horizon, but it did not arrive as a gift. It was another uphill journey. Despite the rejections, low-rent housing, and numerous auditions, Keanu was quietly demonstrating something bigger than stardom. He was developing endurance. The same fortitude that had gotten him through absent fathers, broken homes, and bare cupboards was now bringing him through Hollywood's capricious gates. The youngster who used to load and unpack luggage for each new place has learned to keep his actual home within himself. Persistence, humility, and the refusal to give up. The world hadn't yet anointed him a legend, but he'd already exposed the most important truth: he wouldn't break. Keanu Reeves started the 1990s as a silent outsider, rather than as Hollywood's golden kid, tall and restless, with more scars than ties. However, the screen rapidly revealed what the others had overlooked. In Point Break, he wasn't just another action hero chasing waves. He was a man who could combine energy and sincerity. It was his first view of the dilemma. Danger and depth are inextricably linked, as if every blow had both muscle and sorrow. The tide had shifted and the world was taking note. The tide surged quickly. The bus exploded. The entire globe cheered. Sandra Bullock is by his side. Keanu was catapulted to new heights overnight. However, when the studio offered a fortune for a sequel, he took the more difficult path. He refused to sacrifice integrity for repetition. That single no was a bloody line, proof that his career would be based on principles rather than shortcuts. Hollywood, in its ruthless nature, made him pay. Labels like irresponsible and imprudent stuck to him like cutting glass. But Keanu endured them silently. As if to put him to the test, the mid-1990s became yet another crucible. Johnny Mnemonic and Chain Reaction failed. Critics gathered like vultures and whispers spread. Perhaps he was merely a lovely face with hollows beneath his eyes. But then My Own Private Idaho altered everything. Aside from River Phoenix, his closest friend and spiritual brother, Keanu, displayed a raw intimacy that no critic could refute. River represented the family he'd never known, wild, delicate, and shattered in ways that reflected his own. Keanu Reeves's tale is one of brilliance sculpted from pain. From the horrific stunts of The Matrix that left his body scarred, to John Wick's relentless training that strained his knees and spine beyond forgiveness, his achievement was never easy. It was achieved through blood, sweat, and quiet. But the toll was not just physical. Love and loss pursued him at every turn. His early loves faded. Pals like Sandra Bullock's and Winona Ryder's became safe havens. And with Jennifer Syme, he finally saw family, until tragedy took both their kid and, subsequently, Jennifer herself. River Phoenix's abrupt death, as well as years spent caring for his sister Kim as she battled leukemia, intensified his sadness while also shaping his gentle compassion. Keanu remained resilient throughout. On screen, he twisted reality as Neo and defeated armies as Wick. Off-screen, he carried scars, silence, and a generosity few people witnessed, funding hospitals, assisting crews, and showing kindness to strangers. At 61, he lives for tranquility rather than spectacle, sharing a home with artist Alexandra Grant, restarting his band Dogstar, and focusing on causes that he is passionate about. His legend is not just based on the roles that elevated him to immortality, but also on how he transformed agony into humility and compassion. Every limp, scar, and modest gesture